The third analytic tradecraft standard is about distinguishing between the underlying intelligence and your assumptions and judgments. This can be hard to do because when you analyze an intelligence problem, you look at information and data and can't help but create some assumptions and judgments as you work through the problem. Why are these distinctions important? Well, our customers will be making decisions around policy, plans, operations, and acquisitions based on our evidence and assumptions. They expect analysts to state what they know, what they do not know, what they assume, and what they assess. This clarity is necessary to support your customer's decision-making process, which includes evaluating risk, determining a course of action, and planning for contingencies. How should we think about these distinctions? Distinctions must be clear in your own mind before you can communicate them to customers. Clarifying these distinctions begins when you develop research plans and conceptualize products, and it continues through the analytic process as you evaluate evidence, identify your assumptions, and generate judgments. How should we convey distinctions in analytic products? When you make a statement in a product, you should consistently use signal language to indicate whether the statement is evidence, a judgment, or an assumption. If you are not familiar with signal language, here are a few examples. Use a source characterization to indicate that a statement is evidence. Use a likelihood or probability term to signal that a statement is a judgment, and use "we assume" to convey an assumption. When using two consecutive sentences to provide information from the same source, use careful wording to make sure it is clear to the reader that the source characterization applies to both sentences. Note that commonly known unclassified information about major historical events or basic country data, such as leadership or geography, don't require a source characterization. ICD-203 defines assumptions as suppositions used to frame or support an argument, and it notes that assumptions affect analytic interpretation of underlying intelligence information. In practice, you can define an assumption simply as a statement that you believe to be true but cannot support with evidence. Assumptions can be found in many places in your analysis and can serve as a springboard for developing alternatives. Common assumption types include framing assumptions, which are your mental models of how actors or systems behave; scoping assumptions, which are choices you make when defining the bounds of our intelligence question; evidence assumptions, which come from how you interpret and evaluate the evidence you use to support your assessments; logic assumptions, which come from the reasoning process you use to construct your analytic arguments; and finally, bridging assumptions, which you use to fill critical gaps in information or evidence. So now that we've covered assumptions, how do we describe them in our products? There are two common ways to do this. First is to distinguish between statements that convey evidence, assumptions, and judgments. Second is to write within the assessment or the source summary statement any assumptions that serve as linchpins of an argument or bridge key information gaps. Sometimes you may need to include what are the implications if assumptions are incorrect and identify indicators that would validate or refute these judgments or assumptions. This is especially important if the change could produce high impact results. Other times you may need to make assumptions to define parameters for factors beyond the scope of an assessment. However, assumptions are implicit in your thinking and can be difficult to uncover. Intelligence community analysts frequently make assumptions about foreign leaders, states' behavior, foreign military capabilities, and international relations. For example, a lot has been written about Qamishiyya, a large ammunition storage depot in southeastern Iraq that was used during the Gulf War. Assumptions were made that it was used as a conventional ammunition depot, and it was mistaken for a neighboring site called Tal al-Alam due to different databases using different names for the same site. This led to the accidental demolition of chemical weapons instead of conventional weapons, unleashing a plume of toxic chemicals into the air, risking the health of U.S. military present at the site. Although this is an extreme example, it shows the far-reaching negative effects of making assumptions. By identifying your assumptions and the implications if your assumptions are wrong, you allow your customers, policymakers, warfighters, and the acquisition community to anticipate what could change your assessment. This is critical for your customer because lack of transparency risks intelligent surprise or failure, especially if your assumptions and therefore your assessments could be wrong.